Broadcasting live from the Zimmer Communications World Headquarters.
Great news for the American people.
This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri with Branden Rathert, featuring Stephanie Bell, News Director Brian Houseworth, John Marsh, and Hannah, the producer.
This is why we listen to you.
Get ready, pal. And now, here's your host, Branden Rathert.
Really, everything started going on Tuesday. It's unclear how these fires started here on the island of Maui, but conditions were just ripe. Maui was essentially a tinderbox. Conditions here very, very dry.
This is Stephanie Bell in for Branden Rathert. John, have you seen the pictures and the video coming out of Hawaii?
It's crazy, and especially some of the video from the helicopters flying over the scene in Lahaina and Maui is just burned to the ground. It's not there anymore.
And I mean, it's similar of things that have happened here in Missouri. I mean, where a fire essentially wipes out an entire town. What was it, last year where we had that? Right here in mid-Missouri. But I think for me,
Woldridge.
Woldridge. It's terrifying. Being on, it's a vacation town. You're at your Airbnb. Are you watching the weather? Do you know how to evacuate when something sweeps up that quickly?
Yeah, you would hope, you would be heads up on stuff like that. But reality is, if you're on vacation in Hawaii, you're probably not paying much attention except the beach and the drink with an umbrella in it.
Yeah, I think of some of the places that I've been on vacation, even down near Florida, and, maybe one road in and out, I'm not paying much attention to the weather at all. And, if I was needing to evacuate quickly, I don't know that ever even crossed my mind. So I think, what are they reporting? 30 people? There's
at least 36 this morning are dead.
That's horrible. And they said some people were even jumping into the water. And some of the video I saw was from at night, and there were like floating chunks of things on fire in the water.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Awful. And speaking of crazy, we had a crazy day yesterday. I don't know what was in the air, but yesterday Biden flew into Utah, and the FBI raided a guy's house. Apparently he had been making posts about assassination, not only about Biden, but about other officials. And the FBI raided his house, and they shot him dead.
Yeah, it was a guy, Craig Robertson, they said. He'd been allegedly making threats against Biden and several others for quite some time. And I guess he was known to him in Provo, Utah, and had quite the arsenal of guns and all, and was ready to barricade himself. And FBI took it into their own hands.
And that was just hours before Biden landed. He's, of course, there today, ready to give a speech about veterans benefits this morning. And then here at home, what happened in this car crash? I just have a note, hatchet lady. Do you got a hatchet just in your car?
Not generally.
Okay.
I was going out to cut wood or something, but no, I don't generally carry a hatchet. Yeah, the prosecutors charged a Jefferson City woman with DWI and a bunch of other offenses after she crashed in the construction zone late Tuesday on the Missouri River Bridge. Apparently jumped out of her truck after it flattened a tire in the accident, started waving a hatchet around at the workers in the construction area on the Missouri River Bridge. They say she was intoxicated. They found drugs in the patrol car where they had her sitting, and even resisted arrest. So it's quite the show.
I imagine the phone call from the worker to his wife at lunchtime. Honey, how was your day this morning?
Yeah.
You're like, well, a little bit unexpected. I didn't expect to encounter. I just, punched my ticket, showed up to do my daily work.
We were going to paint some stripes on the bridge, and, it was a nice day, and the weather was good and all, and
suddenly there was a crazy lady with a hatchet who wrecked her car. It's wild. So I'm glad she's in custody and they've got that situation under control.
Everybody was okay.
That's just another Wednesday in Columbia, but Jeff City, that's different.
That's true.
And keep in mind, too, guys, she also was allegedly swinging a crowbar as well. So there were other interesting things. But it's just those MoDOT workers have enough. They have to worry about, being hit by cars, and it's in a work zone and stuff. But basically, she was allegedly trying to blame them for her crashing her car and getting a flat tire. But as John outlined, some, very serious charges there. And then she'll go before a judge probably today.
Police say she hit the ramp closed sign and the barriers that mark the construction zone. So I guess technically, if you want to blame somebody, blame the crew, put the signs up. But I don't know. I don't know how, like you said, I don't know how that'll last in court.
Yeah.
Now, Brian, you were at the Ready meeting yesterday,
Yes.
and they had an interesting location. They were out at the Columbia Mall, and I saw the article that you posted on our website. And for years, I think people have been saying malls are dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I tended to be in that camp. And now what's crazy is every time I travel, the first place I kind of want to go is the mall, right? And I've been to several malls this year. It's always on my list. And I'm thinking, is that for Columbia when we've got these folks in Jefferson City, when we've got these folks coming in for kids' sports and other things from smaller communities, are they doing the same thing when they come into a larger community? And, our malls have had their ups and downs. What were folks talking about reviving the Columbia Mall yesterday? And I think, if you have an opinion, you can text us at 573-874-9390. Are malls dead? And if not, Brian, you posted on the website asking people, or on our Facebook page,
Yes.
asking people what stores, could the mall bring in that would really attract you back to the mall? So give us the highlights from yesterday.
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, thank you, Stephanie. 93.9 The Eagle Facebook page. I think people also weighing in on KWAS. I'll have another updated story this morning because so much news came out of there. But in a nutshell, that really was the theme that Rusty Strootman presented, who's the general manager at Columbia Mall. Of course, Brookfield Asset Management used to own Capitol Mall, but they sold that one, but they still have Columbia Mall. And basically his message was, yes, a number of malls around the nation are dying, but this one is not. They're at 90% of their pre-COVID level. Level Up was packed yesterday. It was so busy. It was raining, and I had a hard time finding a place that was even close to the stores to get into a door. They basically had $150 million in sales last year, $12 million in sales collected, 1,500 employees. It was packed. This was during a workday, 11:30 in the morning. It was very busy in there. Everywhere going into that mall. And the other big announcement that came out yesterday, Stephanie, is that Rally House is going to be opening its second location. They're going to keep the downtown Columbia location, which is very popular but hard to park. They are going to take possession next month, open this fall. Lots of excitement in the room for that. Other stores they are working to try to get. Level Up is doing very well. And people on our Facebook page are saying they want to see an In and Out. That's the thing I keep seeing, In and Out. That seems to be a popular place. Like on the West Coast, that's a possibility. But one thing Rusty told me, they want to get more restaurants. He mentioned they've got Wendy's, they've got Panera, they've got a food court, but in his words, they don't have a place where somebody, let's say, could take a date. So they're trying to get some sit-down restaurants in there and have them built on the outside. They got plenty of land, so a lot of work going on, and they've also invested $5 million into their parking lot. So lots of, the room was so packed that they had to literally bring out extra chairs for those of us who were coming in to cover it to sit down. It was packed. Almost the whole city council was there in Columbia. They were interested in this. To the point where the city attorney actually somebody had to go find her, and they had to write a note saying something about a quorum, so they couldn't really comment because the majority, in other words, it would have constituted a meeting, and people laughed, but they had to do that because 4 of the council members were there. That's how big this meeting was.
That's a real concern. I saw someone posted on the Facebook page they wanted a cheesecake factory. You could take a date there. But I think it's fun to brainstorm, and I think certainly, the owners of the mall and the community want to know what would actually bring people there. And yes, I'm sure Level Up is packed. I think those interactive things where there's activities are really important, especially with the types of communities we have in mid-Missouri. I know, we've been to Level Up several times. They've also got the Children's Theater out there at the Columbia Mall, and I know that attracts a lot of people. Does. And for busy families, one of the benefits of the mall is I can make a bunch of stops in a hurry if I'm out there for some other reason. So interesting discussion yesterday with Ready. I think, if you have a suggestion what you'd like to see in the Jefferson City Mall or the Columbia Mall, and if you want to weigh in on whether or not malls are just dead or not, would love to hear from you, 573-874-9390. Well, we've got a lot of guests today, and one why am I always hosting when we decide to have Bill Eigel on?
Just lucky, I guess.
I hope he's ready because we had some fun the last time he was on, and of course we had Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, who is also running for Missouri governor, on yesterday. He had some interesting things to say about libraries, about day one in office, about what that Ohio vote and the abortion issue, how that might play in Missouri. So we plan to cover all of that with Bill Eigel today.
We also talked about Tyson too.
Oh yeah, Tyson Foods.
Sure
Huge. That was my biggest takeaway.
We will add that to the list of things to talk to Bill Eigel about. We'll be talking with him at 7:35. We will be joined by Randy Tobler of our afternoon show at 7:10. We will also have Missouri, or Child Care Aware of Missouri, Robin Phillips will be joining us at 8:10. We've seen some action from the Missouri Chamber saying that this is one of the number one issues for workforce. They recently had a forum in Kansas City, and we actually found some unity among Democrats and Republicans in Missouri. And Hannah, I think you have a clip from that for us.
I do.
Well, let me give you a quick stat while we're waiting for you to grab that. So the Missouri Chamber of Commerce has been doing a lot of surveying, asking actual employers, what are your biggest issues? And in Jefferson City, one thing we heard from the new city administrator was housing. We know that's an issue, but a survey published by the Chamber said 28% of respondents claimed that they or someone in their household either quit a job or turned down a job because they didn't have access to affordable childcare. So,
and this was some of the big employers in Jefferson City. Some of the factories said, "Yeah, what do we do?"
Right, and if you in affordable, I think is childcare accessible? One, and I've been to communities where there just aren't any openings, and people are frantically posting saying, "Can I get an opening?" And then second, is it affordable? Because I can't take a job at $30,000 a year if I'm paying more than what I'm bringing home in childcare. And especially once you talk about having 2 children potentially in childcare, for a lot of people, the math is pretty easy on that. And then you can't take a job or you're forced to quit simply because, the math doesn't work out. Hannah, do you got that clip?
Every time he would go to an event, childcare inevitably came up. It touches nearly everyone in the state.
I am so grateful for the Missouri Chamber and the governor's leadership on this issue. I think they have been instrumental in shifting the conversation forward by framing it in terms of it really is a workforce issue. I think sometimes it's been relegated as a women's issue or a family issue, and I think we should care about those issues anyway, but they have really moved the ball forward in making a business case for our state.
Now, that is State Senator Lauren Arthur, a Democrat out of Kansas City, giving high praise to the governor in the way that he's been addressing that issue and framing the issue. So I think that's rare. I mean, it's rare for all of our conservatives to be agreeing, but I think on that issue, a lot of people are coming together, and I think we're going to see a big push for that in the next legislative session. Again, we'll be talking to Child Care Aware, and we will be talking to Robin Phillips at 8:10. So if child care is one of your issues, I hope you will join us then. Also, next up, we're going to do the daily DC rundown. Now, Trump is not going to State Fair today. Of course, the Missouri State Fair also kicks off today, but Trump will be in Iowa. A lot of the other candidates will be in Iowa as well, but I was shocked to learn these folks are coming with Trump. Have you seen this headline, John?
I'll let you
all right.
Surprise the listeners.
Oh, my goodness. So 9 Florida Republicans are coming to the Iowa State Fair with Trump. Of course, DeSantis is expected to be there, but Trump just finds the ultimate way to troll his opponents, and you have to give him a little bit of respect for that.
Yeah, they were joking on one of the TV channels about calling Trump and the Backstreet Boys to play the Iowa State Fair.
Now, do they still wear full suits to the state fair?
Oh, I don't know.
Get powdered sugar from their funnel cake on their black jackets?
Surely not. Surely not. I made the mistake of dressing up a little bit once for the Missouri State Fair, and you really do need, it's always so hot, so you really do need cool clothing and probably a pair of cowboy boots. Trump doesn't wear boots, though, does he? I don't think I've ever seen him in boots.
I don't think he's a boots kind of guy. He's usually golf shoes.
Yeah, that's right. And a cheeseburger and a Diet Coke in his hand, right? Well, Trump will be at the Iowa State Fair. The other interesting news, he said, I'm going to decide next week whether I'm going to end up in Milwaukee at the debate, which is now about 2 weeks away. As part of the debate, the Republican Party is saying, look, you need to sign a pledge, a loyalty pledge, essentially, that says if you want to participate in our debate, you have to say you're going to eventually support the nominee. And Trump said, I'm not going to do that. You can just hear him saying that. No way I'm going to do that.
I'm not signing anything.
Exactly. And he said there's a handful of candidates, 3 or 4, that he could not support no matter what. And I want him to name names.
Spill the tea.
He didn't name, which is surprising for him.
Yeah, for Trump.
I wonder if, and him and Chris Christie are currently kind of in a spat. He makes comments about Chris Christie's appearance, and Chris Christie is now coming out saying, hey, if you got something to say it to my face, get on the debate stage. And now Trump, I think, is using this pledge as, I don't need to get on the debate stage. I'm not going to sign the pledge. And it's another way to kind of shoot shots at his opponents. So I want to ask Bill Eigel about that. If there was something like that where you had to sign a pledge in the gubernatorial primary, would he sign it, you think?
My question is, will all 3 of the leading GOP candidates agree to debate each other in the Missouri governor's race?
That's a good question. We haven't seen a true debate, I think, among GOP candidates as of late. We had a couple forums when we had the Senate, the heavily involved Senate primary, but I never thought we had a true debate.
It's been a while.
It has been. Well, also, we're finding out this morning that Trump's Twitter, Jack Smith obtained a search warrant for Trump's Twitter. Elon had to pay, I think at that time, had to pay a big old fine because they missed the deadline for turning over Trump's Twitter account to the feds. So very interesting news coming out as well. Yesterday, James Comer released a third bank memo detailing payments to the Bidens, apparently more payments to the Bidens. And then shortly after those payments to the Bidens, those folks were dining with Joe in D.C. So the timing looks very bizarre. And the fact that Joe keeps saying he never knew anything, also very bizarre. In the meantime,
it's just a coincidence, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Come on.
Just a coincidence. Well, Dianne Feinstein got John Marsh in the studio.
Good morning.
And producer Hannah is with us, of course. And Brian Houseworth is on top of the news and weather, including this fog. John, I had a little bit of trouble getting in this morning. The fog was thicker than I expected.
I guess I got lucky. I missed most of it coming in. And when you got here, Stephanie said when she got here, she couldn't even barely see the turnoff off Highway 63 to come into Jefferson City, right?
I was driving slow, so if you are headed out the door this morning, you might give yourself a little bit of extra time.
Yeah, I had a lot of issues from California until I got on 63 in Jefferson City, and then it was kind of patchy from there on to Columbia, but it was pretty rough there for a while.
Yeah, I agree. So give yourself some extra time if you're headed out the door. The fog is unexpectedly thick this morning. Also, you need to give yourself some extra time. We're going to give you some tips for life here. If you're headed out of the country, you need to apply for your passport now, apparently.
If not sooner.
Yeah, or last week, essentially. Josh Hawley's office is saying that they have received a 371% increase in requests for help, because apparently that's what you can do. If you don't have your passport and you've got your airline tickets booked, the one place you can really go is to your U.S. senator and say, is there any way you can help me out? There are special offices, but I've heard they're really hard to get into. So if you are planning international travel, which is weird to me because I had to do a renewal and get some new passports last year, and I went to the Jefferson City post office. The folks there were so wonderful. I could do it on my lunch break, and it was like clockwork. I think it even came early, and so I don't know how. And this was still post COVID, so I don't know how between that period of time and now we got so backed up. But I've seen lots of Facebook posts from folks saying, "Oh, we're getting nervous. Our passports aren't here." So. If you haven't done that, please do. Also, if the government has your information, Missouri's Medicaid system had a hack that they announced yesterday, I believe, but it happened earlier, and they're saying, hey, keep an eye on all of your financials, do a credit check, whatever. But John, who might be affected by this?
Well, it did say that information may have been accessed that includes names, client numbers, dates of birth, medical claims information. They say it was a cyber attack that happened in May through what they call a subcontractor, but was not isolated only to Missouri. So, if you've got friends in other states and they're Medicaid recipients, they might also want to, check their bank accounts and their cyber information, because it doesn't sound good.
And potentially healthcare information. And it's like we just passed PDMP, right? Our prescription drug monitoring. And the government always assures us this stuff is safe. But what we know is just like, private entities, and sometimes it sounds like due to a private subcontractor,
yeah, exactly.
They can be vulnerable. So keep an eye on your finances, especially if you could have been affected by that. Now, we've talked about problems in the workforce, and at 8:10 we're going to talk about childcare. But in Jefferson City, the big topic has been housing. And I think some of the larger employers have considered maybe we need to just provide our own housing if we can't get it elsewhere. And Google is doing just that, but they're not doing it in the way that you might think. They have built their own on-campus hotel, and now they're offering a special for their employees to use their hotel. And folks are saying, great, I can just give part of my paycheck back to my employer. They're asking me to pay for this hotel. But I think when I was younger, I thought I would love to just live in a hotel. I think it would be it sounds like the ultimate luxury.
Well, I had a good friend, as I was telling you off air, in high school, grew up at the Hotel Governor. Because his dad was a manager of Hotel Governor, and that was their primary residence.
I heard that place used to have a ballroom, and I spend some time there because the Public Service Commission is there now, but it's kind of chopped up, and I would have loved to see that hotel in its heyday.
Oh, back in the day, it was famous for the Rathskeller Bar down in the basement, and it was real popular with the railroaders and all that. So, yeah. Hotel Governor in Jefferson City has pretty colorful history.
I think my answer would depend on what type of room I was living in.
Yeah, Super 8, right?
Are we talking about a standard room? Is it a really nice suite?
Ritz-Carlton.
Well, Google is charging people $99 a night, and they're saying, well, that's roughly $3,000 a month. And where Google's located, that's way cheaper than rent, actually. And they're saying, but wait, there are tons of perks when you live in a hotel. You get the gym, you get cleaning, you get access to food,
little baby shampoos.
Yeah. And so they said, actually, that $99 a night, if you don't have to pay for utilities, there's so many, and they're like, you can sleep an extra hour because there's no commute. You can walk to work. So I think it's kind of a steal. Like, I think it's a good deal.
It would be so nice to be able to run the heat or AC at whatever temperature you wanted and not have to worry about the utility bill.
I'm like dishes and food. We were staying at an Airbnb over the summer, and I had to explain to little 6-year-old Eden, I said, we got to go to, Whole Foods and grab some food, because we don't have any food for breakfast. And she goes, but Mom, you just go to the breakfast room. And I said, you have stayed in too many hotels. We love like Missouri-based juries and family hotels where you can just go to the breakfast room. And I can imagine
I'm going to make a waffle.
Yeah, exactly. It's like being in a college dorm all over again. So Google employees have mixed reviews on whether a hotel is a good idea or a bad idea. But I think I think we are going to have to start exploring creative solutions, especially with our larger companies.
A lot of the tech.coms though have spun off from a lot of the meal perks and the open bar after hours and all that. A lot of them have gotten away from that.
You're right. And I saw some stats the other week about, for example, in Missouri, a lot of folks are back in office. In fact, the majority of people are, but still in these bigger cities where a lot of these big tech folks are, I think the statistic was about half of the employees are actually coming back to work. And so you have to imagine what are you can't really provide food every day if you don't know how many people are going to be in the office.
That's a good point. And we heard Zoom, too, of all people, wanted people back in the office a couple days a week, which is about as ironic as it gets.
That's hilarious. It really is. And so how we adapt, even though we're post-COVID, how we adapt to kind of our changing workforce and our changing situations, I think is a big question, not only nationally, but here in Missouri. How do we capitalize on that? And so I say living in a hotel would be really fun. You know when it wouldn't have been fun? During COVID. I mean, I imagine those people living in shoebox apartments in big cities, and just I don't feel like I weathered the pandemic the very best. There were certainly days where it got to me, but I think had I been trapped in a prison cell apartment, I would have been really or in a hotel room, a small hotel room, I think I would have really struggled. So the benefits of Missouri are many. Hannah, we're getting some text about this mall question. Are malls dead? And if not, what do you want to see in your local mid-Missouri malls? Brian, of course, was over at the Ready meeting, which occurred in the Columbia Mall yesterday, and they were talking about Rally House going in and asking folks what else needs to go to the mall.
In-N-Out Burger.
In-N-Out Burger. I like that. Cheesecake Factory. And they were saying, apparently it's got 90% occupancy, which is pretty good for a small.
Phenomenal in this day and age.
A small mall. I think so. And as much as I thought, I think malls are dead maybe 5 or 10 years ago, I think I've changed my mind on that. When I travel, the first thing I want to do is go to the mall and to some of the stores that maybe we don't have. And and it's interesting to see things actually in person and not it feels kind of nostalgic. And the malls that I've been going to are packed, and the stores, they're full. And so,
well, look at some of the destination places that people have. How about Mall of America in the Twin Cities? I mean, it's like people take vacations there. Yeah, right.
But Hannah, some of the texts coming through are saying, well, maybe the malls are geared more toward younger people. And I think, it's kind of beyond my time. I took my daughter shopping at the mall for her birthday because I think that's really fun. But, people in your generation, in Gen Z, Hannah, they're so used to Shein, which is, and now there's a new one, Temu, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And they are, and the stuff
Amazon is what they're used to.
Well, yeah. And so what do you think? I mean, I think now it's not up to my generation. It's probably up to yours on whether or not you're showing up to the mall or not.
Yeah, I think of some of the bigger stores in the Columbia Mall. It's been a while since I've been in there, but H&M has a gigantic store in the mall. That's kind of a younger, trendier store. Jefferson City has Dillard's, and they have Pennies, and it's not necessarily as many of the young and trendy stores, I would say. John, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think Jefferson City's mall, apologies to the farmers who are running it now, it's kind of bare bones anymore. They've lost a lot of renters and all, and they floated that proposal a number of years ago to maybe put a convention center in there, and that was turned thumbs down by the city council. So, gosh, Capitol Mall in Jefferson City's had its challenges.
And I think one thing that's been a bright spot is Fuji, is the food. And I think that's what Brian was saying in Columbia, is a lot of folks were saying, bring us some food. We want a place that we can go out on a date night, which I think you could do at the Capitol Mall. I think people were saying maybe Cheesecake Factory up in Columbia, then you could go on a date.
That would be amazing.
I disagree.
What?
I'm not a Cheesecake Factory
we
fan.
We have a listener, Mark, texting us at 874-9390. He said that we need to bring in a Belk department store. And he actually said that the old Macy's building would be perfect for that. And I tend to agree with Mark. I am surprised that the Macy's building has sat vacant for this long.
Boy, it has been a long time. Years, hasn't it?
Yeah, so rent must be outrageous over there. I can't think of another reason why that big of a building would just still be sitting empty.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion. I think good on Ready for having their meeting out there and kind of drawing attention to how, they can do. And you think about Mid-Missouri and all the families that come here, visitors, et cetera, a lot of them are coming from communities without shopping centers or malls. We kind of, I think, living in Mid-Missouri, maybe we don't recognize the advantage that we have. And I think, Hannah, your generation can do Shein, but I think I've ordered something from there once and it took 3 weeks to get here. So that's been really, those malls have saved me a few times where it's like, I have to have this pair of shoes or I need this today. I need it now.
Well, you're fortunate, I think, in our Columbia market to have a mall that's at 90% capacity, like Brian said. But, Steph, you're down at the little Lake of the Ozarks a lot. Look at Factory Outlet Mall down there and how it kind of just fell away.
It's really struggling. And, I would say 6 or 7 years ago, it was great. You could go down there. The stores were full. I remember I went, and I didn't even know, I knew this was a thing, but I didn't know the extent of it. And I went down there on Doe's Weekend. Do you know what Doe's Weekend is? The opening season of deer hunting weekend.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
All the wives?
Yes, these women had matching shirts that said Doe's Weekend. And I will tell you, I waited in line for, probably an hour in some of these stores in the checkout line down at the mall because it was packed full of women who had planned a trip when their husbands were hunting.
There you go.
And I was shocked, and I had a great experience. And I recently visited that Lake of the Ozarks Mall, and I thought, this is nothing like what it used to be. But
it's pretty bare bones.
And they've got a new development going in too down at the lake. So I'm thinking folks are thinking with the renovation of, for example, Margaritaville, with this new proposal coming in, with additional visitors, perhaps they could bring up the mall. And it is surprising, I think, because what we've heard from the lake is so many more people moved there during COVID for the schools and for everything else. They drew in a lot of big city folks who've actually stayed. And we've just read about them being the MAGA Hamptons. But in order to be the true MAGA Hamptons, they're going to need better shopping. And so I'm kind of surprised that influx of folks during COVID didn't, kind of bring that mall
kind
up
of rejuvenate it a little. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Travis has a really good idea for the Capitol Mall in Jeff City.
Okay.
He's suggesting that we go in as business partners. He says we can build half the mall into apartments, and we can revive the mall. I don't know about that one, Travis.
We do need housing. I don't know.
And there you go.
That could be one of the things. I think the other thing,
barracks rooms in some of the stores or something.
I think getting creative, both on our housing solutions, on our childcare solutions, and on our mall solutions is really important. And I think those are the communities that are thriving. I heard from somebody that they saw a live pickleball match inside of a mall. Brandon's not here to talk to us about pickleball, but I thought that's kind of cool.
There's a professional pickleball tour.
Yeah, in Missouri, we can't play pickleball in the winter. Imagine if you could go to the Capitol Mall and play you need some netting and stuff. But I've been, for example, I know, you can go to late night establishments, and a lot of times I've seen whole places full of ping pong, and they've got netting, and you can kind of play indoors. So I like that idea. Add that to the list, pickleball. All right. song's like fairly new, right?
What's it? When was it? From?
23 years ago.
Did you
Okay,
just
not
say
quite.
what?
I mean, I wouldn't have guessed 23 years. Apparently, when asked about the song, DJ Casper said, well, I just created the song for my nephew who worked at Bally's. It was like a stair-step aerobics like workout routine. And he's like, then it just took off from there.
And
I
how many
could see
bucks
it.
at every wedding has he made off of this since?
He must have made a ton of money. But again, Willie Perry Jr. dead at 58. Hannah, is this on your wedding playlist? It has to be, right?
I'm sure it probably is.
What's the newer version of the Cha-Cha Slide? There's a newer one,
I
right?
actually was just watching a TikTok the other day, and it was saying that as of, recent years, there's not been like a big wedding bop. Like all of the current like songs that they play that everybody knows, that there's a line dance to that everybody knows, they're all older songs.
It's from our generation. You're welcome.
So somebody
You're
needs
welcome.
to step up and come out.
Crazy in Love, Beyonce, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody needs to step up and release a new wedding bop.
I think so. Then we can debut it at your wedding, which is when on the moon in January on the new year. They are launching a space shuttle
There you
today,
go.
by the way. I think it's one of the Virgin Galactic. It's like the space travel folks, and that it's really weird now to hear that in the morning when you wake up and people are like, "Oh, we're launching another space shuttle," just like it's getting an Uber ride to the moon. It's all cool.
Yeah, if you have $350,000, heck, jump on right along with us.
It's really bizarre. Well, I did want to point out, and we asked the secretary briefly yesterday about these new initiatives. It appears some folks have filed some new initiative petitions in Missouri, and they seem to be perhaps aimed at the issue with the abortion IP this year. And and we've heard from abortion advocates that really the attorney general's, they're blaming him and saying that he just wanted to delay. So it would allow them to go out and collect signatures if there is this kind of hang up, and you wouldn't really have to wait for the ballot title to go collect. So interesting in Missouri to see if that would get traction, especially with what we know from Ohio. Coming up next.
News Director Brian Houseworth, John Marsh, and Hannah, the producer.
This is why we listen to you.
Get ready, pal.
And now, here's your host, Branden Rathert.
Stephanie Bell in for Branden Rathert this morning. We are joined by Randy Tobler of our afternoon show. Something I always like stories where I'm like, this is not being talked about. I want to ask people, what is not being talked about that should be being talked about? And this is on the top of my list. This Chinese-owned lab in California. We talked briefly about it yesterday, but I don't understand why it's not headline news on every major outlet, in that there were just vials of infectious diseases. No one was paying attention. Apparently now the officials are saying there was nothing to worry about. We're so worried about China. This was on U.S. soil with COVID, with HIV, hepatitis, all sorts of infectious diseases right under our nose. And you know, when I go to my local pharmacy, I can't get Sudafed without working over all of my information to the government. Yet these folks can just have a lab right under our nose. Have you been following this, Randy?
I've seen it, and you're right. It's been a bit of a blind spot because we haven't really heard about it in the mainstream news. In fact, even the alternative in the independent news, we haven't heard much about it. And I think what's really insidious about this is that this apparently is sort of a done deal story now. I mean, it actually had been going on for months, apparently, during the late winter and spring, and they were doing all the cleanup. And then it's only now that, well, okay, a little yawn and a wink, and okay, no big deal. You're right, it is a big deal, and not only for the immediate threat that it could have been. Let's assume that everything was cleaned up right. I haven't heard about any of that being the epicenter of any local, epidemics that could turn into something bigger. So it's very, very nice that nothing escapes, because it sounds like it was really sort of a haphazardly run place, or maybe abandoned. No one really understands. The bigger issue is whether it's the Confucius centers in our schools, whether it's them buying up land, the Chinese, throughout rural America, whether it is, places like this. How many other, sort of infiltration zones do we have in America for the Chinese? And we're just turning a blind eye to it. We're more concerned about maintaining the rights of 6-year-olds to tell their parents to get their breasts cut off than we are the serious existential threats to our country. You're right. It's been an interesting ignoring of a very, very, very grave threat to America.
I know Missouri politicians, Randy, have really, kind of gotten proactive and gone after Chinese-owned businesses in this state and trying to rein that in. I don't know how successful they've been so far.
No. But now's the time when we really, given all of this rain of data that we have. I mean, I think more and more Americans of all political persuasions realize that China's a threat, and their activities in America are an active current threat to Americans. And now I think more than any, when there's some news coming out that the Chinese economy might go into deflationary zone. They've certainly overbuilt these unbelievable, almost fictional type cities that are largely unoccupied with their grandiose ideas. Now's the time when they potentially are a little weak, and this is the time when we should just absolutely hammer them and play by the same rules that they set for our businesses over there. We really need to take the opportunity now to use the old Reagan doctrine, peace through strength, and let's take it to them while we have a chance, because I think they're a little back on their heels at this point.
I think so, too. I think you're right on there. Now, if we focus here on Missouri, big news out of Ohio this week with their vote on initiative petition reform. Apparently, the Missouri Senate Democrats are already fundraising off of Ohio. Let me just read something from their email. They say, in Ohio, Republicans tried to undermine democracy by making it harder for voters to pass ballot initiatives. In Missouri, Republicans have promised to try the exact same thing in 2024. In Ohio, Republicans resoundingly lost. In Missouri, the ball's in our court. Click now to donate, basically. So they are capitalizing on Ohio. How do you think that changes the landscape here in Missouri?
I have been so conflicted over this, Stephanie. I literally spend a lot of time praying as to what is the right answer here, God. I mean, I believe that the taking of any human life at any stage is an abomination and is really puts whoever participates in that in some eternal and mortal threat. On the other hand, from a political perspective, trying to save as many lives as we can, you wonder if sometimes the enemy of better is best. And and I'm using a political term here, by overreaching and going for the grand slam, if the pro-life movement, in the wake of Dobbs and the exuberance at the state level, I mean, for not prominently of which is Missouri, if maybe the calculus here has forgotten about that old Reagan saying, if you get 80% of what you want, it's been a really good day politically. But on the other hand, then that sort of concedes something that shouldn't be conceded, and that devalues the life of the, let's say, that 5-week baby or the 4-week baby or the 6-week baby, or we're below wherever you might set some politically expedient threshold. I don't know. It's been a tough one, but I think we learned in the 22 midterms that absolutely this issue drove an awful lot of disappointment. Races that should have been won by conservative Republicans were lost because it really galvanized and motivated the left to come out and vote for their pro-abortion stance. I think the first thing we should do in answer to this, stop using the word, and I know you don't, stop using the word pro-choice. We should not concede that language. It's not a choice. It's pro-abortion. And we need to stop adopting the language of the left, because right then you've already given them a little one-eyed jack in their hand, and we need to be conscious of that.
Randy, we know Branden is quick to point out when we talk about this and the potential ballot issue that could show up in Missouri in 2024, some sort of modified wording and all, that a lot of the polling says this is something even conservative voters might well approve.
Yeah, and again, I've come to the conclusion at this ripe old age, who enjoys malls and is okay with line dances from the 90s, and I'm sort of that kind of guy, that maybe we can't change people's moral attitudes and their perspectives from political, moves. Those just can't. Legislation can't really determine the culture. Lo, we try. I mean, all we can do is sort of try to put some limits on it and try to minimize some of the disastrous cultural erosion that's gone on. But at the end of the day, until there's revival in this country and until we have a real change of heart among people as to what's truly important in life, like life, I don't know that legislation is going to really fix anything. And so that's why I'm sort of thinking it might be best to concede a little something at this point politically, loosen up the law a little bit to allow, in cases of rape and incest and, maybe a different level of age, and see if that doesn't get it. The problem is you give the left an inch, they'll take not 1 mile, they'll take a whole country. And that's our big problem.
Yeah, and Randy, I think you're right. And the more we can focus on their extremism, I think there are some specific exceptions that I think Missouri voters have said in polling that they would support. Right. But I think making sure that folks know, yeah, you're right. The Democrats, you give them an inch, they'll take the whole thing. And, the reporter tried to shout down DeSantis for claiming that Democrats wanted abortion up until birth. And Branden had a whole montage of Democrats saying, yes, I support the right up until birth. And as someone personally who was adopted, who has siblings who were adopted, I mean, it made me sick to hear them say, yes, up until, that baby is actually born the day before birth, as the woman is getting, we believe in the mother's right to just murder. At that point, I think there are no questions. And so I think focusing on their extreme views will do us good. I have to ask you about this article that John turned me on. I think we need an official medical opinion here, honestly. I know you don't normally give those, but this is the headline. Nose-picking healthcare workers more likely to catch COVID, data suggests.
Yeah, nose-picking anyone is more likely to catch any infectious disease, whether you're a healthcare worker or not. But obviously, if you're a healthcare worker, you're going to be exposed to more germs. And if you decide to introduce them into your nasal tract, which is where most respiratory viruses enter, some through the GI tract actually as well. But it sort of makes sense. I mean, if you're doing finger painting in a cesspool and then you put it in your nose, you're going to get a cesspool in your nose. That's the way it goes. Getting back to the abortion thing, let me ask you. You and Hannah are so techie. It just sometimes intimidates the heck out of me. I really admire that. But maybe, and going to what you said about to highlight the abortion side's radicalism, what would prevent, because now that there are going to be these initiative petitions, you see these people out at various places. What if there was an army of pro-life folks, anti-abortion folks, who would have some kind of a ready at the switch video setup that was mobile, that you could just right next to the guy with the petition or the gal have a picture of the kind of things I've seen. I've seen babies on an ultrasound, 16-week fully formed babies. Yeah, the proportions are a little bit different than when they're born, but I've seen them crunched up, literally gone up and a clamp just gone and crunched them up so they can be pulled out of the cervix, out of the uterus. Do you think that would be effective, to just fight fire with some serious visual fire? Maybe that would change people's hearts. I don't know.
I would hope so. And I think there are organizations out there that are working to that end. But I think, obviously Democrats are organized. I've heard after their victory in Ohio, the funders of that victory are already targeting other states to see where they can go do that next. Of course, there's a new initiative filed in Missouri to protect, quote unquote, the initiative process. And I think that that could come into play, and I'm hopeful they don't have their eye on Missouri. Brian, did you have a question?
I do. Stephanie, thanks so much. I've a quick question on something unrelated but very important. I know to Randy and I have talked about it. I was in the courtroom, Randy, not on abortion case. This was a homicide here in Columbia, a dice game in Columbia. A guy was killed over $3 at Douglas Park. That's based on his mother's testimony, Corey Jordan's mother's testimony. Randy, Corey Jordan is looking at potentially 18 years. They did a plea bargain because there's some issues with witnesses. Perhaps they're intimidated to come forward. I don't know. They didn't elaborate, but there's some issues with witnesses, and the defense confirmed that to the judge. But the sister of the victim, Corey Jordan, also spoke. And this is an African-American woman. She was there with the Reverend James Gray. And she said in her testimony, it is time for Columbia to get serious about fighting violent crime. And she also said, Randy, it's time to focus on crime victims. Her words in the courtroom. Your reaction?
Yeah, look, this is another example of our failure as a society. We've abandoned, in the name of freedom and thinking that freedom is a one-sided equation, we've abandoned that all-important and absolutely necessary for free society, the concept of accountability. That goes to the schools, where we excuse away kids who don't turn in their homework, and instead of throwing an F at them, an incomplete, you get another chance. You get another chance. That goes to the kid who's caught shoplifting, taking a pack of Wrigley's gum from the checkout. That kid needs to be told, if their parents won't do it, someone in authority that really lays down the law and brings the hammer on them in it, of course, an age-appropriate way, does that. And then when and we've talked about it, these recalcitrant career criminals, there comes a time when we just need to say, and earlier the better, you have to be accountable for your actions. Enough of the victim mentality, enough of the, my ancestors built this country and there was slavery and therefore I shot someone over a dice game. Not going to pass muster anymore. We've got to just get back to those basics. That's all. It's accountability, plain and simple.
I like that word. I think if more candidates ran on accountability, we would be in a better place. Well, what can we expect this afternoon quickly on the Randy Tobler Show?
Aaron Hedlund's with us from Show Me, talking about the numbers that are out today with inflation, and then, of course, Jennifer Bukowski, which is always a wild ride. You never know what's going to happen. Jen brings a lot of interesting topics to the table, and she's not afraid to speak her piece. I like that.
We will look forward to it. Thanks for joining us. Up next, we are going to do What's Hot with Hannah, but a quick means it's
7:27. 7:27, Stephanie.
Oh gosh.
That's ish.
Yeah, it's a lot of ish, actually. No, this morning, a university is making headlines, and I have been seeing the fallout of this on TikTok, of course. It's getting ready to be college move-in time, especially for students who are staying in dorms. And Auburn University had to completely shut down one of their dorms last week. And move-in day is like 2 weeks from now, not even 2 weeks. And people are upset. There was flood damage to the building, and the university originally said that they could get it fixed by the end of August. And now they have come out and said, actually, it's a lot worse than we thought it was going to be. And we don't think it'll be completed in time for everyone to move in. And we don't want people to move in mid-semester. So we're just going to close it for the whole school year.
Whoa. So where are these people going?
Well,
can't go to Lincoln University in Jefferson City. They don't have room either.
Well, and Auburn is having issues where they're also booked up. So they were so nice as to give the students like a hotel credit through the end of August. But after that, they have to find a place to live.
That's horrible. Where are these people going to go? I know.
In a college town, no less.
Bama.
And I think, I think Lincoln put people up in a hotel for a little bit when they had an issue years ago.
I think they did.
I know that's, obviously that creates some budgetary pressure, but I mean, these students have to have some place to live. I mean, some students, I'm thinking, what are they supposed to move into their car? But a lot of students go to college with no car.
Well, like President John Mosley from Lincoln University in Jefferson City told us the other day, because they're shutting down their largest dorm for remodel, they're doubling, tripling, and quadrupling up on double rooms with 4 people in some of them.
And so they're catching a lot of hate on social media, Hannah?
Oh, yeah. This building was supposed to house 305 freshman students. So now there's over 300 students just SOL. Basically, trying to find student housing this late in the year is going to be nearly impossible.
Well, I've seen TikTok is also overtaken and we'll start off with that.
Well, there have been some statements at the state level that have mischaracterized what was going on at Tyson or mischaracterized what the law was. Tyson has had to respond to those, and that is just, look, I've visited the Tyson plant. I was talking to some chicken farmers 2.5, 3 weeks ago down in Southwest Missouri, and we have not had the relationship with Tyson that we should, and we need companies to know that Missouri is an area where they can be, where the rules are going to be clear cut, where we're going to treat them fairly, where they're going to have good.
It sounds like Secretary Ashcroft and Bill Eigel are on the same page here. I'm looking at Bill Eigel's Twitter, and it says the status quo is responsible here. That is what I intend to change in 2024. Unity. So, Senator Eigel, I want to ask you, how would you, if you were the governor, how would you have prevented these job losses in rural Missouri?
Well, first of all, I think we need to understand, and by the way, thanks for having me this morning. Glad to be here. I think we need to understand that the same things that are good for rural Missouri are the same things that are good for the entire state, in as much as the policies that the Republican Party keeps promising to pass and enact in the state of Missouri to make Missouri attractive for all companies, whether it's Tyson Foods, whether it's companies that are going to stay here or companies that are going to move here, we haven't been enacting in Jefferson City. So the reforms to our tax code, getting rid of things like personal property tax and income tax to make Missouri an attractive place. So if a company finds themselves in a position to where they have to make a decision of if they're going to close a couple plants, maybe they don't close the one in the state of Missouri, they close the plants in other states. But the status quo prevents us from passing these policies. The status quo is exactly what prevented us from making some reductions in the property tax burden this year. The status quo is what's driving government spending that's getting inflation out of control and it's getting costs to rise across this country so that the companies are doing worse and worse every single year. And it leads to scenarios to where they're starting to close. That's the status quo we're trying to change. And if we continue to have leaders in the state of Missouri, and I would argue that Mike Kehoe and Jay Ashcroft are exactly part of that status quo, things aren't going to get any better for rural Missouri. They're not going to get anything any better for anywhere in the state of Missouri. And that is exactly what I'm trying to change as the next governor of this state.
Senator, talk to us about regulation on the state level. I know lawmakers have talked long and hard about trying to lighten up on some of the regulations, especially in some of these big ag producers.
Well, if you look at, I like to say there's only two objective ways to measure the size and scope of government, right? One is the number of taxpayer dollars that it spends on your behalf, and two is the number of laws and regulations that a citizen or a business entity have to comply with in order to stay out of jail or to stay in the good graces of the tax man. And by both of those measures, unfortunately, we, the Republican supermajorities, have made both of those measures bigger in this state than we've ever seen before. There are more regulations on businesses. There are more taxes being levied on businesses and individuals in this state than we've ever seen in the state history before. And so it's no surprise that when businesses have to make a decision about either A, whether they're going to move to Missouri or to other states, or B, if they're going to stay in Missouri, we're seeing answers that we don't like to see, just like we saw with Tyson plant, the Tyson plant. So I don't know. I couldn't tell you exactly which regulations it was or exactly which taxes it was that caused Tyson to say, you know what, we're going to shut down some of our operations in the state of Missouri. But I can tell you that we've been failing by both of those measures for the past 15 to 20 years as Republicans who in campaign season have promised something entirely different. So we've got to get back to what we keep promising, which is less taxes, less regulation, so people are going to want to come here. And by the way, I think there's been some talk out there that, hey, maybe if we would have had more incentives or more targeted tax credits for a company like Tyson, that this wouldn't happen. But here's the reality about all those tax incentives that we passed down in Jefferson City. Per capita in this state, we do more of that tax incentivizing for specific companies than any other state in the union. And these are the kind of results we're getting from that. Overall, the state isn't growing. We're seeing companies like Tyson leave this state, and it's not working. We need to adopt the policies of the Tennessees and the Floridas and provide broad tax relief, get rid of all personal property taxes, get rid of all income taxes in the state, and get spending under control. That's what's going to prevent the next issue like Tyson from happening again in the state of Missouri.
We are joined by State Senator and gubernatorial candidate Bill Eigel.
Senator, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Stephanie and John, by the way, doing a fantastic job hosting. I'm glad you brought up Tyson. Very important. And I have posted the full interview, by the way, with Secretary Ashcroft on 93.9 The Eagle and also the KWS website. Senator, I do want to ask you about a bill that you worked on all session. I was at the Ready board meeting yesterday. The Columbia mayor announced that Governor Parson will be in Columbia Tuesday to sign the I-70 expansion bill. 6-laning I-70 essentially from St. Louis to Kansas City. The first stretch of that will be Columbia to Kingdom City. What will 6-laning I-70 mean specifically, you think, for mid-Missouri?
Well, I think it means a great deal. In fact, Brian, as you know, I was one of the ones to start talking about this subject last January when I filed legislation of how we were going to fund that. So I'm certainly, of all the things I'm critical of in the state budget, and there are a lot of things to be critical of in the state budget, rebuilding I-70, I think, is one of the critical components that I was a fan of. So what does it mean for the folks in mid-Missouri? It means the same thing as it's going to mean for folks across the state of Missouri. I-70 is our number one commercial interstate corridor. We are positioned geographically in the country that is going to be a major thoroughfare, not just for the people of this state, but for interstate commerce around the country. So I think that was an investment that was overdue. We had surpluses. We have gigantic surpluses down in Jefferson City. So it made sense that this was a good time to do it. I would tell you that I would have preferred to fund it more through additional surpluses and setting aside future revenues than through some of the debt financing that I think the governor and Senator Huff ultimately agreed to do. Because again, there's no need to have deficits from debt financing when we have so much cash down in Jefferson City. And I would make the argument that in addition to that infrastructure improvement, we should have been far more aggressive about using the remaining surpluses to cut taxes. But that's something I'm happy about. I think that's a long-term investment that's really going to pay off for the state.
Gotcha. Thank you, Senator.
Of course, it's popular to say cut personal property taxes. And when we talked about Tyson and asked you about Tyson, that was one of the first things you said, and I see it on your Twitter. But necessarily that would involve two other options. I want to take the next step. If we're cutting personal property taxes, that means either we're cutting some sort of spending or we're picking that money that we were getting from personal property taxes up from another tax. We're increasing some other revenue for the government. So which option then would you be choosing? And then if you're cutting, what are you cutting? Because a lot of personal property taxes go to local entities, not the state budget. So how, if we cut personal property taxes, what's the next step? What happens next?
Well, so I think that there is a implied assumption there that if we take away a little bit of the revenues that are going to all these local government entities, that they're going to lead to some sort of cut in services at the local level. I disagree with that. Every one of the local government entities that are getting personal property tax right now, every single one of them, whether it's schools, whether it's fire departments, whatever it is, they have record amounts of revenue coming in to those sources, adjusted for inflation, too. So even though costs are higher, adjusted for inflation, there isn't a government entity in this state, a local government entity in the state that's getting personal property tax right now that doesn't have record amounts of your tax dollars. So my contention is that the problem is not that, we got to be worried about how much more money is going to be continuing to go to government if we try to cut taxes a little bit. Really, the concern for me is how can we lower the tax burden a little bit on Missouri citizens and businesses to provide some relief to what is currently in this state a record tax burden. So people often ask me, they phrase that question a little bit different, Stephanie. They say, if you get rid of personal property taxes, how are you going to replace it? Here's my answer. I'm not. I'm a Republican. I cut taxes. I'm not here to play some sort of shell game with, hey, I'm going to cut your tax here, but on my other hand, I'm going to take it from you somewhere else. The tax burden in this state is too high. All taxes in this state are too high. They need to come down, and government needs to start taking a tightening of their belt the same way the citizens of this state have had to tighten their belt over the past 2 years as we've been suffering from Biden inflation and the Biden economy. But in fact, I can't. It just amazes me when I go down to Jefferson City and I see the record amounts of surpluses that we have down at the state level for state level revenue. That is a entirely different story from the stories I'm hearing from actual citizens of this state that are struggling to make ends meet. And part of the problem that they're struggling to make ends meet is a crushing tax burden in the state. And that crushing tax burden is also the reason why companies are moving to other states not named Missouri, and why companies like Tyson are moving out of this state. So I am not worried that government's not going to have enough of our cash at some point in the future. I am worried about the taxpayer of this state. I'm worried about the citizens of this state, and I want to see them have the best possible chance to be successful. And that's not going to be – we're not going to get there by constantly worrying that government has too much or too little of our cash.
Senator, I know when we've interviewed folks from the Jefferson City School District and asked them about the potential of the personal property side of the tax going away, they're quick to point out that we're hold harmless. We heard from Representative Schulte from Callaway County here a week or so ago. He said he talked to the county clerk up there, and it was about, well, if that went away, it'd be about 1/3 of their revenue coming into that county. Is there a solution to still be able to do this and not cut some of those entities that need some of the funding?
Well, the way that we set up the bill that I had proposed that was going to get rid of personal property tax is we phase it out over a number of years. So we make a cut to the personal property tax over a number of years. I think that what we had in the bill, it would have taken a total of 7 to 8 years, so that it really minimized the impact in any particular budget year. If theoretically, where I'm from, St. Charles County gets about 15% of its money for personal property tax. Well, if we take 7 or 8 years to do that, that means that every year local government has to find 1 to 2% improvements, efficiency improvements in their operations. I'm very comfortable asking government to take a 1 to 2% efficiency improvement every year for a few years so that we can get away from an institution like personal property tax that is devastating, is one of the reasons that this state is not growing. So again, we get tied up in if we get rid of this really bad tax that's also one of the highest rates of personal property tax anywhere in the country, gosh, what are we going to do about government? The focus in 2024 that I'm talking about as I go around the state running for them to be the next governor of the state is not a worry about government. Government has never had more of our money than it has right now. What I'm talking about is a worry about the Missouri taxpayers, businesses, and citizens of this state that are suffering from the record tax burden that's being placed on them right now. Republicans need to get away from being the ones to say, "Oh gosh, we can't get rid of personal property tax because gosh, it's going to hurt over here in government." We need to be the defenders of the taxpayer. We haven't been doing that. That's why government's bigger than it's ever been before in Jefferson City. That's why our local governments are bigger than they've ever been before. And by the way, for the spending that you talk about, the school board down in Jefferson City. By the way, in return for all the record amount of spending that we've done for our schools on this state, how are the outcomes? They're not so great. So
I would agree with you there that the outcomes aren't so great. Okay, we got to wrap this up. We got about 60 seconds. We've heard that Trump is not going to join the debate stage in Milwaukee. One reason he's citing now is that the Republicans want him to sign a pledge that he will support the ultimate nominee, and he's saying he's not going to do that. If you were invited to a Missouri gubernatorial debate and had to pledge that you would support the ultimate nominee to stand on that stage, is that something you'd be willing to sign?
Well, I'd have to give that some thought, but I can tell you I've already accepted a couple invitations to debate the other candidates in this race. I'll tell you this, if I thought that there was a statewide office holder who could be governor of this state on the Republican side, claiming to be a Republican, that I thought that I could support in the general election, I probably wouldn't be running myself. So right now, I can tell you the messages from both of the other candidates are so divergent from the message that I'm putting out. That's talking about making government smaller, that's talking about cutting taxes and making Missouri competitive with the other big red states in this country. It's difficult for me to imagine ever supporting either one of them.
That's state senator and Missouri gubernatorial you were planning on traveling overseas and you need your passport, you should have applied about a month ago because they are really backed up. So one thing, again, if you're traveling, you need to get that passport application in ASAP. I have personally dealt with the office at the Jeff City Post Office, and I would highly recommend it. It was an easy experience, and they were super helpful. But now it's time for the John Marsh special. That would be all except for this.
There it is.
That we definitely did not forget about.
No, we did not forget about it. And we preface this by saying this isn't stinky flowers or frozen you-know-what falling from airplanes. This is one, how was your summer vacation? Well, we bet it was better than this couple. Alan Stevens of Hull, England, booked you notice how these are always somebody from England, they're never from the U.S., booked a surprise 17-day trip for his wife's birthday to the Dominican Republic in late June. When they arrived, however, it was clear the resort's 5-star rating was a bit of a mistake. While at the resort, Stevens and his wife observed a variety of alarming behaviors, he called them. When we went out to the pool for the first time, we saw guests smoking weed in the pool, people having sex in the pool, and then one woman getting sick all over herself in the pool. We were approached by people offering us drugs about 10 times in the 17 days. Then a woman fell from a balcony while we were there, and we walked past and saw the body under the sheet. We had no idea what was going on. When we were out one day, saw a man knock clean off his motorbike and burst out crying because on top of everything else, it was such a shock. The travel company that Stevens worked with offered them £200 in vouchers and counseling credits, which he called a joke, and said, this was 100% the worst holiday we've ever been on.
That sounds awful. So maybe what you're saying is maybe I don't need to apply for my passport. Maybe I should just go to the Lake of the Ozarks and call it good.
Trust but very
issue. I think they have been instrumental in shifting the conversation forward by framing it in terms of it really is a workforce issue. I think sometimes it's been relegated as a women's issue or a family issue, and I think we should care about those issues anyway. But they have really moved the ball forward in making a business case for our state.
Now, you don't hear that very often. That was Lauren Arthur, a state senator, a Democrat state senator out of Kansas City, with high praise for the governor on the focus and the way that he's been framing the child care issue. Of course, if we go back and flash back to the state of the state last year, we heard the governor, he actually brought I would call her a locally famous daycare provider, Miss Sharon of Discovery Place, which was my daycare.
I thought you had some connections there.
Yeah, and they were even the kids were there present for the event, and the governor said this is a critical issue. We've got to do something, and of course, like many things in the state legislature last year, the child care agenda didn't quite get to the finish line, I think, like some had hoped. I want to bring in Robin Phillips with Child Care Aware of Missouri. I happened to meet her at the Missouri Chamber Women's Forum, and I know where Lauren Arthur was speaking was a forum on child care the Chamber just hosted, and the Chamber is saying this is going to be one of our biggest issues for next session. That has to be exciting for another organization who focuses on child care to have a partner in the Missouri Chamber. But since you're a new guest to Wake Up in Missouri, tell us a little bit about Child Care Aware of Missouri and what your focus is.
Hi, good morning. Yes, this is Robin Phillips, and Child Care Aware of Missouri has been around since 2000. We're actually a nonprofit organization located in St. Louis, but have a statewide footprint because of some of the other services we deliver to build into the child care workforce themselves. Child care professionals need access to resources and higher education and training, and so we administer some of those contracts on behalf of the state. We also, for 23 years, have been helping families, connect families to child care, and some of that's going to be shifting in the next couple of months. But nonetheless, that's a free service that's funded by the state. But what we find, though, is that even families that are calling us or want to vent their frustrations because they can't find child care. And so it's trying to coach them through some other options or other things maybe they haven't thought about, and making sure they have that consumer education so they're informed about where they're leaving their child. Also, too, taking a focus on, and have been for a while, on capacity building, but much more intentional and very different than we've done it before. Building supply. I think everyone knows it's really hard to find childcare, just like at the beginning of this session, talking about someone who couldn't find it. We have a lot of deserts. 72 plus counties in Missouri are considered child care deserts for children 0 to 5. But when you drill down even further and look at infant toddler care, it's even more so of a desert, because that's the hardest to find and the hardest to pay for. So I'll stop there. We do a lot, and that's some of what we do.
Talk to us about how the pandemic compounded the whole problem of affordable child care.
Well, I'll tell you, I've been in this field and doing this kind of behind the scenes systems work for 23 years. And the affordability topic and the access topic has been there the whole entire time. COVID just peeled back the layers on the onion, or pulled back the curtain and exposed all the fragmentation. And when we started reading about, and then as the U.S. Chamber Foundation reports in the Missouri specific report they did, just the number of women leaving the workforce, women who want to have careers outside of the home, and trying to help get them back to work, or find that child care to return back to work, or even after parental leave. And it's been very, very challenging. Those deserts were always pretty high. They were about 65 prior to COVID. They've kind of steadied out in the mid 70s, 72, 75. Certainly there are efforts, and I commend those efforts for building into startup and expansion grants that the federal relief funding has provided. But the child care system and the kind of assistance that most child care businesses need is not necessarily being provided at a level they need it at. And so we find burnout, we find high turnover, very low wages. I mean, minimum wage bumped people up when it went to $12 an hour across Missouri, it was less than that prior to that wage going up. No benefits, high stress, caring and educating young children. And that's my background is in child development. And I've worked in childcare, and it's very stressful. And these educators are impacting the first 2,000 days and should be partnering with the families so that it's a partnership to impact that child's life and maximize their potential.
I learned during the pandemic as someone with a child 0 to 5 and another one that was 5 that I couldn't handle the stress of regular daycare providing. And so I think we learned a lot through the pandemic. We are speaking with Robin Phillips, the CEO of Childcare Aware of Missouri.
Thank you, Stephanie, and John as well. And Robin, appreciate your service in a very important issue, very bipartisan at the Capitol. And yet, despite the bipartisan support, it was unable, obviously, to cross the finish line. It died in the last week, probably due to unrelated issues. The statistic I have from the governor's office and the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, and this is this week, I know it changes a little bit, but they are saying that right now we only have enough in terms of licensed child care slots in the state, capacity to serve 39% of children under 6 years old. And the number they have, by the way, of counties is 89 of 115 that are a child care desert. What do you read into those numbers?
Well, one, I'm not surprised by those numbers whatsoever because, like I said, I've just kind of been following the story along for a very long time. And so that doesn't surprise me. It concerns me as an advocate for children's safety that parents don't have access to support systems or family members to help them, or they may be relocating here and they don't know anyone and they get desperate or panicked because they have to report to work or they're going to lose their job. And so they may not be making the most informed decision on where to leave their child. I think, as we see some districts in our state go to 4-day school the school week going to 4 days, as we look at and certainly commend the investment to expand public pre-K through schools and community-based child care. However, there's a little more, there's a lot that a child care center, a community-based one, would have to do to qualify to get that public pre-K grant, as having certified teachers and things of that nature. And so, the other concern is, if what happens to our child care infrastructure around slots, if more 4-year-olds get pulled from child care into public pre-K, which I'm not discounting whatsoever, but the concern on the backside is community-based child care can't survive off providing 0 to 2 care because of the cost. And so we have to make sure that we are, as we move forward in the next legislative session and have these conversations, we have to make sure we're inclusive of the entire ecosystem and that it's not just all about public pre-K, but there are certainly other value adds, including family child care providers that are around our state that more often provide that shift care for manufacturers and companies that have production lines that, their employees can't work from home.
Now, as a small government gal, we talk about these workforce issues, and here in mid-Missouri, we have major housing issues, and we hear, we need more public taxpayer dollars to help with the housing issue. And I think one question we always pose is, but what about the big employers? Is it incumbent on them to help solve some of these housing and maybe provide some housing for their own employees? We've seen Disney said they were going to put housing next to Disney for their employees. We talked a little bit this morning about how Google was going to provide a hotel that their employees could utilize. Are you having those conversations with Missouri's big businesses about, hey, what can you do to provide some of this, to step in and fill some of these gaps? And I think a lot of people would be, if I was offered a job and they said, and, you just bring your kid to work and there's, in-house childcare, I think that'd be a huge perk. I guess, are you having those conversations, and what are you hearing in response from the business owners if you are?
Yeah, I started having those conversations more intentionally about a year ago and kind of was doing some runs around some smaller communities around the state to share ideas and strategies and solutions that we were seeing happening across the country, because we're part of the national network, so we're pretty well connected on some other ideas. And, the narrative has, and as said earlier in this broadcast, it is not just a family's problem. If we want quality of life in our communities, then economic developers and employers and big company names need to think about, what does that mean? what do we want our community to look like for our children and for our families so they stay? You know, our company is an employer. We just recently, for the first time in 23 years, approved offering parental leave for new parents and foster parents or adoptive parents. And I think it's a matter of employers stepping back and reassessing what benefits are you offering to your employees, and is it even anything they really need? Certainly insurance and retirement plans and all that absolutely that's not really, that's not something we want to do away with. But I think assessing their employees and making sure those employees feel safe to disclose that information, that they're not going to lose their job if they say, listen, I don't have reliable childcare, I don't have reliable housing. You know, so yes, I absolutely think it has to be a partnership approach. No one entity, whether that's the federal government, state government, or businesses, can follow it. It has to come together. But the conversations I'm having, and I was just at the Missouri statewide SHRM conference, Society for Human Resource Management, heard the same thing from them this year as I did last year, and that is they cannot hire people. And they've looked into on-site childcare and realized just how expensive it is, and they're concerned about the liability. We're coming up with some solutions that utilize existing and potentially new childcare programs to form a network for employers, so employers don't have to necessarily have that on-site care and can still say to their employees, hey, listen, you want to come and work here? Well, listen, we have this network that we can refer you to because we've contracted with them for slots. There's some of that exists in your urban areas. I don't hear a lot about those kinds of partnerships in rural Missouri, and our organization, and as well as I'm certainly sure others are talking about it, need to play a role in being that glue and bringing that together.
Sure. No, I think it's rare, especially as of late, to find a bipartisan issue. And I think people are really starting to develop a consensus that this issue really is reaching a critical point. And so it's nice to hear more about folks who are on the ground working on these issues every day. And hopefully we can catch up with you as later in the session to see how those issues are moving along in the legislature. So we really appreciate you joining us, Robin.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. We have to keep talking about it, or else we'll sit here a year from now having the same conversation. So
and for
thank
folks,
you, and appreciate all you're doing to keep it forward.
Yeah, for folks wanting to learn more, they do have a website, mochildcareaware.org. Encourage you to check that out. Coming up next, we are going to do the Morning Bell, your business news with a twist. We're also getting some CPI data in this morning. The numbers appear to be basically right on expectations. CPI core inflation is at 4.7. The expectation was 4.8, and just general CPI up 3.2, just slightly below the expectation of 3.3. But the market's responding positively for us meeting those expectations this morning. But still, inflation, right? Branden likes to talk about the new Hummer and how he'd be all about the new Hummer and the EVs if he had $100,000. Is that what that new Hummer costs?
$120,000.
Oh my goodness, I can't. And so in my mind, I'm just thinking, when did cars start costing as much as homes? Because in mid-Missouri, you could buy a home, like a decent home, for $125,000, a small one, but still, that's the price of a house, and people are paying this for their cars. I saw some data last week, and they said I think more than 25% of people who took out a car loan last year are paying more than $1,000 a month for a single car.
Ouch.
Who are these people? That's what I want to know. Who has
people who are leveraged to the max? That's who they are.
I don't know. I mean, I can't. I think my highest car payment I've ever in my life is and I'm not a car girl, so I buy used cars. I've never had a new car, but I think my highest car payment ever, even when I didn't put something down, was like $200 a month, and that felt. And at the time,
I think that day may be long gone.
You think I can
unless you don't mind driving a 25-year-old car.
I know, Hannah, you're on the look for a new car, right? Your car's on its last leg. Mine is too. And with inflation and with interest rates, I'm hanging on, and I'm going to drive that car until the wheels fall off. What about you, Hannah?
Well, I have had a wheel fall off of a car, so I'm not gonna use that phrase. But yeah,
Okay.
it's a rough time to be having to look for a new car or a used car.
Well, if Branden does not want to buy the new Hummer, he could opt for Cadillac Escalade IQ. It's a brand new all-electric SUV, and it retails for $130,000. What's the monthly payment on that over 5 years? That's some quick math. I can't do that, but
plenty.
It's outrageous. I mean, that's like a house payment, and the difference is your house, you can spread it out over a longer time, but these cars, I mean, I can't go there. It is very pretty. They have pictures of it online, and apparently, we're pushing to these EVs. And I think, again, would these things actually be affordable? I think conservatives would be willing. I drive an EV if it would save me money, but I don't see that anywhere. I'm not going to hold my breath that EVs will ever be in my price range. All right. Coming up next, we've got more lessons learned, whether or not how we learned yesterday, how you name generations and how it's just completely up to, maybe if you write a book, you can rename a whole generation, which
whatever
I think
you want to call yourself.
Pretty significant. But also this health thing, you can overdo it on this liquid, and I had no idea. And I think you will want to know that. So stick around. me and President Trump.
You're a beverage goblin.
I am a beverage goblin, and this is a new term, I guess, that Gen Z has said. But right now, well, I've already thrown away, I think, 2, but I've only got 2 out in front of me right now. But yes, at any given point, if you come to the desk where I am working, my desk will be completely covered in various beverages. And people will say,
the queen of the energy drinks.
Right?
You heard it here first, folks. Stephanie Bell is a heavy drinker.
I know. And they say, like, well, you drink too much Diet Coke and that stuff's bad for you. Well, this article was just heartbreaking that I saw over the weekend. An Indiana mom of 2 died after drinking too much water on a family vacation. And I didn't even know this was a thing. You see those like gurus, and they have those giant bottles that are like basically milk jugs, and they're like, you have to be at this level by 8 a.m. and this level by noon, and you got to, drink. And I thought, I just figured the more, the better. Apparently not. You can die of water toxicity.
Apparently so. There's a limit to everything, and water's one of them.
I think these are the things that they should teach you in school. Right?
My fiance, my boyfriend at the time, he went on a big weight loss journey, and he was drinking a ton of water every day. And it was getting to the point where he was getting really bad leg cramps because he was drinking so much water that it was diluting his electrolytes, basically. So I'm not that surprised.
And I think that's what they said was it dilutes like the salt in your body and causes this toxicity.
Your
and so
kidneys can only safely filter out so much water in a set amount of time.
I had no idea. So if you are feeling dehydrated, I think they said you can try Gatorade, some stuff with more electrolytes or water with salt. But again, you talk about, do I really need long division, or do I need to know things about my health that I feel like I should have learned before the age of 29?
Stephanie.
29.
Right? Brian, tell us what else you're hearing about this fog. Is it still thick out there? We were getting some reminders from folks on the text saying, slow down, watch your following distance, turn. And they said they noticed a lot of people without their lights on, but I struggled coming in this morning with the fog.
Absolutely. And just a very quick comment about the staying hydrated is so important. And then I have to answer your question about the fog, because it's very important. But people just please try to do that. Sometimes people forget, but no, I didn't know that. I've always tried to drink water. I've also been told to drink non-sugar Gatorade, but my dentist's office has just told me that actually has sugar in it. So no matter what, it makes it difficult. So just try to stay hydrated. That's very important. Fog, very difficult right now, but it was even worse this morning, to the point where I could not see these. I could not
Brian,
see.
you get a big fat F for your parking job this morning. I'm just going to call you out.
Well,
I've seen a picture of your parking job, and it was.
I could
not have parked. He was in the lot.
Yeah, I was in the lot. Thank goodness there was hardly. I think there was one other car in the lot, but I could not see. So it was not good. But yeah, it was.
Brian has the smallest car in the parking lot, and he was straddling the line and taking up two.
Exactly.
Good thing John and I carpooled this morning, because you totally took our spot.
And Brian did miss the armadillo in the fog, so it was all good.
Exactly, but a lot of it is burning off right now, which is kind of the good news. But still, we're getting some reports of some of the other stuff out there. And again, be patient. I had on the interstate this morning, and by the way, near the Lake of the Woods, no fog at all until I got out onto the interstate, because it's just not in every area. And there was a tractor trailer tailgating me, and I could barely see. That's how thick the fog was this morning, honking, wanting me to go faster. You can't do that. So please, folks, be patient. I don't know where you wanted me to do.
How fast were you going, Brian?
Probably 40 to 45. That's about as fast as you could go to really see. And I'm even thinking that was probably too fast, because if you come up on a car or a crash, it was that thick. That was some of the worst fog I've seen in quite a while.
I had slowed.
It's better now, but it's still not great.
Yeah, I had slowed way down. So if you are headed out a little late this morning, you might want to give yourself some extra time. Well, Trump this morning is still dominating the headlines. We're learning that he's headed to the Iowa State Fair today. And in true Trump trolling form, he is trolling DeSantis by taking 9 U.S. House lawmakers with him from DeSantis' home state that will be there to support Trump in a little, I don't know, fair. What are they doing? They're just wandering around, I guess, at the fair. But
like you said, eating funnel cakes.
Eating funnel cakes. Yes, fair food is in. And actually, the Missouri State Fair kicks off today. So exciting times both in Missouri and Iowa. And I'm sure there will be some news breaking. I know Chris Christie was out telling Trump, if you've got something to say it to my face on the debate stage. And of course, Trump says, I'm not getting on the debate stage as of today because I'm not willing to sign a pledge where I would agree that I'm going to support the ultimate nominee. He said there's 3 or 4 people, he didn't name names, that he could not ultimately support. And of course, we asked state senator and gubernatorial candidate Bill Eigel this morning, hey, if you were asked to sign a pledge, would you be able to do that? And he hedged a bit, but I think ultimately his answer was basically no. That if he could support somebody else, he wouldn't be in the race. So interesting commentary by Bill Eigel, and he also hinted that he's already kind of agreed to some debates, which we were kind of wondering yesterday whether we'd see an actual debate.
We've already heard some rumblings on the street about people actively approaching the 4 GOP candidates out there already. So I'll get them all on the same stage together. Boy, I don't know if I'm holding my breath at this stage of the game.
I think that'd be healthy, and I think Missourians deserve it. So I want to see a Missouri gubernatorial debate. Bill Eigel did bring something up, and I was actually reading the Show Me Institute puts out some nice publications with articles, I think pretty regularly. And this latest one had an article they called "All Roads Are Leading to Florida." And Bill Eigel brought up incentives and said, hey, Missouri is giving out, all of these incentives more than other states, and we're not getting bang for our buck. We're not, up there in the economic development rankings. And I found this stat to be crazy. Despite being a significantly smaller economy, Missouri has given out over $1 billion more in tax subsidies in recent years than Florida. I thought that was wild. And so this article had tons of good nuggets about Florida. So I know I hate on DeSantis a little bit for his Disney wedding and for his
wow, you do with your law partner, all things considered, who is quite the DeSantis supporter.
I know, but that's why I kind of liked this article, because I don't like the Disney wedding. I don't like the fighting with Disney, but this article from the Show Me Institute focuses so much just on conservative issues. And so if you were out there and someone's giving you some pushback on DeSantis, I would encourage you to check out the Show Me Institute, because they've got really good data on Florida. They said it was in 2022, it was the fastest growing state. Its education scores, it was number 4 in the nation in 4th grade math, 3rd in 4th grade reading, and they said it performed really well in achievement gap ranking. So in populations of school kids that are historically are not doing as well, that it really brought those kids up and is performing really well there. It also said, so in narrowing achievement gaps, its violent crime rate was right in the middle of American states, which I was actually a little bit surprised. I guess they have some big cities, but I was assuming that maybe it would be amongst the lower violent crime states.
I would have presumed it had been more towards the higher side. Well, all the drug trade still and all that. I guess it's not the Miami Vice era anymore, but still.
I think this part is really interesting. They said their emphasis on education and youth outreach means that their juvenile arrests are at their lowest levels in the past 46 years, down 51% in the past 5 years. And I think that is huge when you're talking about, how to get people started on the right path and keep them on the right path and out of your prisons. I think that is a really crazy stat that I hadn't heard before.
Florida has no personal property taxes either, do they?
And they kind of said that's a given. No personal property tax, no income tax. So obviously Florida, you know those stats, but some of these other ones, I thought, for folks out there saying this is why DeSantis is my guy, this is a good blueprint. The other thing they pointed out was toll roads, and that for infrastructure, putting the burden on folks who actually use those roads is really important. And Florida has, I think, the most toll roads of any other miles of toll roads than any other state. They also have as many commercial airports as Texas and California, which supports their tourism industry. So talking about their investment in infrastructure, I think, is also really important, and reasons why I think there are a lot of people in Camp DeSantis. So I'm excited to watch the fair and see how all of the candidates interact when they're in the same place.
Well, I've got the toll roads are very interesting, because the roads, I've been down to St. Pete Beach in Tampa with Mom and Dad a few times. Not, it's been several years ago, but the tolls are, I thought, reasonable. And I agree. I mean, they weren't too bad, and the roads were in excellent shape. There were also, I can tell you this, there was a much more visible presence of Florida state troopers on the roads than I've seen in Missouri. And I'm not saying anything critical of the Highway Patrol. They've got their hands full. But, I mean, I think they were very visible. Those officers were on motorcycles all over when I was on the highway. The other thing I would say that stuck out to me about Bill Eigel is, and you guys asked some great questions. he makes it sound like there is, very similar to Jay Ashcroft, there has, and he was a little evasive, some sort of making Tyson feel unwelcome. That's 2 days in a row that we've had two candidates say that. And I just find that to be very interesting because I'd not heard that at all up until yesterday. And for people that don't understand, in Dexter, Missouri, and in Knoll, with those two small towns, those Tyson jobs are big. They are big. That's how a lot of people make their living. Taking those jobs out is a big deal. Now, there are critics that say that I've seen critics on Twitter that say that Tyson's a bad company, etc. People feel that way as well. But I can tell you that the community depends on those jobs for sure.
Yeah, I think the other big thing is, his stance on personal property tax. And we've heard the criticism, how are you going to replace that? And he doubled down and said, we're not going to replace it. We're just going to plain cut. And I think we've heard from locals here in mid-Missouri saying there's no room to cut. And you think about all the things that your personal property tax goes to, John, ambulance districts, libraries, schools. I mean,
volunteer fire departments.
Certainly. And so how would, when he's talking about cutting, he likes to talk about the state budget, but it's not just state funds that are being cut. It would be locals. And then how do you replace that? We had one listener, and I'm trying to catch his name here, but he's texted in and said, hey, what about, I've seen on the ballot recently, and Ashland had it on the ballot. I know several communities have had it on the ballot. We're adding these local taxes for marijuana. Is that going to raise any money that could replace some of this? And so that's, I think, an interesting question. My understanding is, of course, the state tax is dedicated to veterans. But on these local taxes, my understanding, I think it just goes into GR for locals.
That's correct.
So it would still, so then again, it would either have to go, the locals could, I guess, give it to the libraries and volunteer fire departments and other things like that. But I suspect they would keep it for themselves. No. So I still don't think how some of these other smaller entities would replace the cutting that, would come from an elimination of the personal property tax.
Well, I was at the Carlin Seawood's budget briefing, and Stephanie, you're absolutely right. The local, and then people get confused because there's a state tax, but the local tax that goes to the sales tax for marijuana, it's 3% and 3%, total of 6%. The local is 3%. To Carlin Seawood's proposed budget, which has not taken effect, it hasn't been approved, but it probably will be approved. Of the $10 million proposed pay raise for city employees, as I recall, $5 million of that proposed pay raise will come from the marijuana sales tax, or at least a portion of it. They'll get some use tax money as well. So most of that is going to go to, and he said it's that important, so it's the local way to do it. I guess theoretically you could raise maybe a sales tax or, some other ways to do it. But it is interesting. I think Senator Eigel has positioned himself is someone who is not afraid to buck the system, and I think he's a formidable candidate. I really do. Every time we have him on, we get responses from listeners. Some don't like what he's saying. I know that, but we also get many that do like what he's saying. So in a crowded primary, and we could potentially have more people get in, I think he has a chance. We'll see what happens. But it is interesting. I was especially intrigued by what I heard about Tyson, because keep in mind, we've had a governor in the governor's mansion for the last 7 years. And that when Jay Ashcroft yesterday specifically said the past 7 years, he didn't say it, but I'm just going to say it for him. He's not talking about Jay Nixon and those previous. He's talking about the past 7 years. Very interesting.
Friday. This week has zoomed by for me. We've got winners and losers. We always do that on a Feel Good Friday at around 8:30. So make sure we'll take your nominations today if you've already got some people identified. We love local winners and losers nominations. That's at 573-874-9390, and we will bank those for tomorrow. We've also got Representative Rudy Veit. John, what can we expect from him tomorrow?
I think we can get a fill-in from the Jefferson City, Cole County representative, see what his take is on the potential for some overrides when lawmakers return in just a few weeks for their veto session.
Nice. And we will be celebrating a Feel Good Friday, so send us your best dad jokes or anything else you are feeling good about on a Feel Good Friday. And also, we hope you wear red to remember everyone deployed. We always do that on Friday. And now it's time for our leftovers. I saw this headline from the News Tribune. Very exciting. Summer. So you heard my lottery losing yesterday. I did not win
the club.
Mega Millions, but I did feel good about it because I donated to Missouri Education, and apparently it's paying off big time for Missouri schools. Summer lottery jackpots generate $27 million for Missouri schools. John, what's in your fridge?
I think we need to revisit the story we did earlier. Missouri Department of Social Services is warning Medicaid recipients that their data might have fallen into the wrong hands. They say they had a cyber attack that happened back in May through what they called a subcontractor, and said it was not isolated only to Missouri, but they did say the department said information may have been accessed includes names, client numbers, dates of birth, and medical claims information. This is for Medicaid recipients in the state, and I think there's sometimes a little misunderstanding. It's just welfare moms. There's a lot of older Missourians who qualify for Medicare also under